You're listening to the Hello World Podcast number 51. My name is Sean Wildermuth and I'm your host. The Hello World Podcast is where you can hear from some of your favorite developers, authors, and speakers about how they got started in this business and the decisions they made along the way. We go way back to their first computer, their first code experience, and their first job. We decided not to have a sponsor for the podcast, but if you want to support the podcast and the kind of things I do, feel free to visit my Pluralsight courses at seanw.me/psauthor, including my newest course on Essential WebStorm. On today's episode, I get to talk to Frans Bouma. Frans is the creator and lead developer of LLBLGen Pro, a leading ORM and Entity Modeling solution for .NET. He's been programming professionally since 1994 after he got his B.sc in computer science. Frans wrote his first code back in 1986 on a Toshiba HX-10 MSX computer, and we'll talk more about that. He's been fascinated with telling computer hardware what to do, what we call writing software, ever since. In his spare time, he has spent more than a decade in the underground scene called Demoscene, first on a Commodore Amiga 500 and later on the PC, writing graphical demos and computer music. Today we talk to him about not only how he got started in that all-important first computer and first language, but we also delve into how he accidentally fell into the ORM space and created LLBLGen Pro and the associated tooling. He and I have known each other for a long time now, since way back when I was the ADO guy, and we ran in many of the same circles. We're on the road right now in Rome, and I did have a bit of an audio issue with this episode, so forgive my microphone issues in this particular episode. But luckily, Frans does most of the talking, and his mic sounds great. Let's take a listen. Well, today's show, I get to talk with someone I've been trying to get on the show. He's been a little shy about it. Welcome to the show, Frans Bouma.
Hey, Sean, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited about getting your story. We've known each other, I don't know how many years, back to certainly when I was the ADO guy. And
a decade, I think, more.
At least. Yeah. And so I was always interested in how you got started. Is it something you grew up with? Did you have a first computer as a kid, or what?
Well, it was in '86 when I bought my first computer. It was a year after I visited my uncle who had a Commodore 64. At the time, I didn't know anything about computers. It was just about a magic box which could play video games like I only had seen in the arcade.
Yeah.
And the thing we had at home was just the Pong thing with the handlers with the knobs you could turn. It was really
wasn't very good.
No, but that was fun. But it was really from another universe, and I was just like, oh man, this is something I really want to do for the rest of my life. Like touch the keyboard and just write things. And
it's very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. It was opened my eyes. So.
And what was that first computer?
The first computer was the Toshiba HX-10 MSX.
Wow, I've never even heard of that.
No, it was a tiny computer, like just a keyboard with some radiator on at the back to alleviate the heat. And I bought it together with my younger brother after a year of running a paper route.
Nice.
Because when we arrived home from my uncle, I said to my parents, "Oh man, we really need a computer." Yeah, sure, but you have to pay it for yourself. So we had to work hard for it, but after a year, it was really oh man, it was a gift from heaven. So well, that's how it started. It was in '86, I think. Yeah, I was 16.
Wow. And were you just playing games on it, or did you start playing with code and that sort of thing?
A mixture of both. The first program I wrote was the program to solve AX square plus BX plus C is 0. That's a standard thing, but I had it in the math class around that time. So I thought, wait, I can write a program now. So I bought a basic book. And I start hacking around. Well, obviously the most awful code you could possibly imagine, but it was really well, it was just magic. I mean, you could just type in commands and it did something for you. It was really awesome. So obviously also games. Well, a friend of mine had a MSX as well. So, well, being a kid is just copying games. So
I don't think you can get in trouble anymore for it. I mean, it's been a few years. And,
yeah, well, it was... later on, I did some other things, but it was really about putting the cassette tape into the player because floppies were just not available, and just record the whole data in a computer, the other tape into the recorder, then write it back down. Oh man, it was really took hours to save stuff. But it was really, it was heaven.
What were those games like back then?
I just did 8-bit games like mostly Konami stuff like the Nemesis and the Galaga, that kind of stuff. Just 16 colors and you and your joystick with one button, fighting the evil and saving the world.
Always saving the world.
Yeah, and you couldn't save your progress, so it was just starting all over again every time. But you did it.
Yeah,
it was just oh man, I'm gonna play the game just from scratch, and all of a sudden you reached a new level, and the world was just looking totally different. And oh man, I reached a new level. What was there? Oh, it was now blue instead of green. Oh man, magic! It was just awesome.
Or I used to leave my computer on when I was in the middle of a level. If I did,
oh yeah, absolutely.
And you come back and okay, hopefully you didn't have a little power surge and lost it.
Yeah. It's really unimaginable in today's era that back then, even 30 years ago, it was really just a keyboard and a tape player with where you have to use a screwdriver to make the sound very clear, so it wouldn't crash at the end of the load time. Well, you waited 20 minutes to load the game, and it simply crashed with a checksum error because the sound was too muffled.
Yeah, or it ate the tape. I don't know if you've had those.
Oh, absolutely.
You put the pen in and spin it carefully, trying to get it back in the tape cassette.
Yeah, and it just wrinkly taped, so it wouldn't load anymore. Oh man, it was just a precious game you hadn't finished.
That's hilarious.
But then after a few years, my dad bought a MSX2, so it was a step up from. From 64 kilobytes to 128 kilobytes.
More than we'd ever need.
But the fun was, it was still MSX, so I could reuse my awfully written programs, and the games would still work, but now we had floppy disks, so
big time.
Really, it was a step forward.
So, in this era, did you were 16 when you got it? Finishing high school, was this something that they had in the high schools at that time as well, or
it was very, very early in '86. No school had computers. It was my math teacher had bought a couple of very big boxes that had 16 kilobytes of RAM, and they could only do monochrome and had a simple basic. But he asked students if they wanted to learn how a computer worked. Well, of course, I wanted to. So sure. Well, you couldn't do much because the things wouldn't do anything. But actually, he just typed some commands and we saw the results, and that was basically it. So no, there wasn't really any education about computers in that time around my high school.
And when you finished high school, is this something you knew you wanted to do for a living? Was it that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And did you go to university for it?
Sorry?
Did you then go to university, or what was the next step?
I first went to the university. You have the master degree course for computer science, but I screwed that mostly because I was only programming assembler on my MSX. And what I wrote was actually looking back pretty awesome because if I say so myself, because I wrote a virtual memory manager for the without knowing what it was.
Sure.
What you had was the Z80, the processor in MSX could only address 64 kilobytes. So when you have 128 kilobytes and also 128 kilobyte video memory, you could store a whole video cartridge, the game cartridge, in blocks into the memory. And you could write a program in the highest region of the memory and switch the pages into the what the processor could see. So you could actually copy the cartridge and write a virtual memory manager that could switch the blocks when needed, and you could play the game from a floppy disk.
Nice.
So that's what I basically did, and that was not very nice for me to the gaming companies, but I've never released the stuff to the public, but just for me to run the games, because I didn't have any money for games at that time.
Sure.
But I spent too much time on that and not on the course at university. So I took a step back and went back to the bachelor course for computer science, which is a lower level in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And from there, I started using serious computer stuff instead of joking around on a hobby computer. So I bought an Amiga 500.
Again, that was the machine I wanted as a teenager and never could find the money to buy. So I'm a little jealous still.
I still have it.
I bet you do.
It was really an eye opener for me, because what you could do with that thing was so much more than what you could do with MSX. I wrote a couple of graphic routines on the MSX computer, but they weren't very flashy. And when I bought the Amiga 500, it was really, oh man, you could do anything with this. And
you went from 16 colors to, I don't remember if it was.
That was still 16 color. 256 colors.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And with tricks, you could do 4096, but then you didn't have any frame rate left. So it was really only for pictures. But some friends of mine from university were in some Demoscene group on the Amiga. So I bought the Amiga, and I said, well, I know how to write assembler, so let's write some demos. So I almost also screwed my bachelor course because I spent too much time on Amiga 500 writing assembler, but luckily I saved that.
Just enough schoolwork to get through.
Yeah, basically. And looking back, that wasn't probably not the wisest thing to do, but
it's what many of us did. I mean, in hearing these many stories, I think you're the 51st story. This is not an uncommon theme.
No. Well, it's a sign that you have the passion for writing software, but at the same time, you forget that writing software isn't a hobby.
Yeah,
it's a profession. So you need deep knowledge about the stuff you're about to implement. So if you think you can learn everything by just typing code in and one day you will know how it works, that's not gonna work. So you have to really study hard. So at the time I didn't realize that, of course, because you're young and why do I care? And I know everything. And looking back now, I know I didn't know anything. So it's really, I'm really lucky that I could finish university and still enjoy the time I spent on writing basically useless code, because Demoscene demo is just some nice effects on screen and
sure
and
not very commercially viable.
No. Well, maybe if you win a competition at the Demoscene party,
sure.
You gain a couple of $100 for example, but that's it. So it's not something you can make a living out. Although a lot of guys I knew from back then are now in game companies. So
that makes sense. That
for example, the company who wrote the PC port for Tomb Raider. Well, he's a famous Demoscene guy from the Netherlands. So
wow. So it was applicable, but it took some time to figure out how to apply it to what would be useful. And so, did you do work? Did you have a job while you were in school, or was it once you graduated?
No, I didn't have a job. I was just a student with a computer, and every time, all the time I had just writing code and creating computer music.
Doesn't sound much different than today, though.
No, not really. Well, now I have a job. I work for myself.
Yeah. But you write code all the time. So what does that first job look like for you then?
Oh, that was like I fell from a cliff. It was really, imagine that it was 94. I graduated, and the PC back then was Pentium 70 megahertz. Yeah. And I had one of these, I think, with 1 megabyte of RAM. Ooh. It was really expensive, but it was really slow. And but I thought, well, my employer will give me a fancy computer. So when I got my first job, my first day, I arrived there and I said, well, this is your desk and this is your computer. And on the desk was a IBM Model 30.
Wow.
And now I think, wow, that's an iconic computer. It's one of the best things they ever made. But then it was, oh man, what is this old thing? And it was
you
just
step back,
MS-DOS and with a terminal to a Unix computer, and I had to write code in 4GL for an ERP program.
Wow.
So it was really
There's
boring.
nothing very sexy about that. Whereas
nothing at
all
all.
the Demoscene stuff you were doing, I'm sure, was very exciting and
it was on the edge. And I thought, well, some new computer at least. but it was also an old hand-me-down from a colleague of mine. So.
Yeah.
But after a while, you learn that what you do with it is important, not what you have on your desk and work with. So after a while, you learn to acknowledge that there are other things that are also very interesting. For example, that you can work on a huge Unix box and do interesting stuff that other people never heard of. So that was actually, I fell from a cliff back into the reality and slowly learned that reality wasn't so bad. So
interesting.
I still had my PC at the time and my Amiga, but I didn't use the Amiga a lot anymore back then.
Sure. And you said you were programming in a 4GL generation language. Was this something custom that they, for doing the ERP stuff, or was it a language that any of us would have heard of?
It was a system called System Builder. I think it's Australian, and it used a database called Universe. Universe is now owned by IBM, and the main thing about Universe is that it could have tables into table fields. So you have a table with a field, and in the field was another table. And it sounds like Inception for databases.
It does.
It's really insane. I mean, and you think, well, that's a powerful feature, but you can easily create crap with it. So my colleagues did. Because I of course didn't, because I was fresh out of college and I knew everything.
Of course.
Looking back, I know I didn't know anything, but
that's how it feels when you first get out of college.
That's how it feels. So you know, well, man, I'm just fresh out of college. You can tell me anything because I know everything. So I of course said, well, this is all crap and you shouldn't use this, and this is all, nobody should use tables into tables and whatnot. But when I look back now and think about the database Universe, which still exists, by the way, I think it's awesome. And actually, it's like document databases.
Absolutely.
Where you have a document which references to other documents, and you can just save it in one row.
Yeah, as long as you think of it that way, right? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, that's certainly the challenge. I had early experience with some object databases, and it was the same sort of thing. If you program them like you did, a typical SQL database, they were awful, and so often they would wash out of companies because people were trying to, they were trying to use a screwdriver to put in a nail, and of course it's a bad tool for that.
Yeah.
So I think of you as, a data guy, a database guy, probably unsurprisingly. And was this your first taste of it, or did you get in college? Did you get database
in college?
Theory and stuff?
We obviously had database courses, but the fun thing is that I really hated it. I really hated databases. I thought, well, there's one thing I will never do, and that's something with databases.
Really be careful what you.
But like I said, I thought I knew. Sorry?
Yeah, go ahead.
But like I said, I thought I knew everything. So I also thought I knew I would do what I would do for the rest of my life. So one thing I would never do is databases. But once I graduated, I learned that everything is databases.
Yeah.
Everything is data and it has to be stored somewhere. So even when people play 3D games, they're actually using a client that's querying a database.
Absolutely.
Like which polygons can I see? Show me.
Yeah.
And the client will render them for you. It's like a query with the query results. So when I thought about it, I thought, well, this is actually not so bad. And when you learn to work with databases like Universe database and also other databases, you learn to appreciate what they are for and the importance and they play in everyday software development. And then you learn that, well, at least I learned that way. Well, this is actually a great way to make a career in, because they are the cornerstone of every application that's being used in businesses.
Yeah.
So, of course, I then started writing web applications and websites.
What was the transition for you like from, an employee into, as far as I know, you have always had your own business and you've always been in the tool.
No, I was employed for 2 years by my first employer. And it didn't work out that well. So I wanted a raise, and they didn't want to pay me any more money. And it was actually a pretty sucky company because they didn't have any career path, and the colleagues I had were really. I was the only one with any degree in computer science. So it was very tough to get anything done, really.
Sure, I can see that.
Beyond the mud level. I mean, everybody can create a big ball of mud, but after a while you think, well, there must be something better than this. So yeah. I applied for to be a consultant at a big consultancy firm called CMG. Currently it's called Logica, I think. I had very long hair, so that has to be cut off because they only accepted people in suits.
Oh.
So it was a complete transition for me. And they had a very high standard of hiring. So it was really the rumor, if you got hired by them, you're really good. Now I know that was a really big mistake, but like I said, I thought I knew everything. So.
Of course.
I transitioned myself completely, and I went to apply for a job there, and they gave it to me. But there was one catch. I had to take the MCSE course. That's really a Windows NT course.
Yeah.
For 6 months, and they paid for it. And I thought, well, what's the problem? I do that for 6 months to pay the course, and I'm one thing on my CV, and maybe I get something out of it. But after 6 months, I was really a great specialist in installing Windows NT on all kinds of servers. But
right, because I always associated MCSE with IT more than dev.
Yeah, it really is. It's system administration. What I really wanted was MCSD, but I didn't know. Mix them up. It's as silly as that. So I threw away one whole year, and after a year, I was really fed up with the culture there. But it was really about squeezing more money out of customers instead of giving them what they needed. So I thought, well, I quit, and I will never make somebody else rich. I will work for myself. So I started solutions design with my wife. And we started creating websites. So that was my first step on working for myself. And then my first assignment being self-employed was a consultancy job to write an application in MSX. That's something different than writing website, but we were just starting. So
you do what you can,
yeah, of course. So, and the application was actually a pretty neat assignment because it was for a press company, and they wanted to have a calculation application that you can say, well, I want a folder with 10 pages and this size, and it calculated how much paper they needed and from which sizes and all that kind of stuff in MS Access with the screens and all, Visual Basic script at the back. And it was actually pretty neat because it was a tiny database, but actually everything was in it. And I really liked the environment, how silly it might sound, because you could do everything in Access.
Incredibly productive for people.
Yeah.
Reporting was built in, certainly the language and screen development, and it all felt like, there's a little known secret, because I don't say nice things about Access very often these days. But I paid cash for Access 1.0 because I thought it was such a good idea at the time.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a lot of cash at the time. For someone who copied a lot of software, the idea of actually paying for a piece of software,
So you were MS Access' biggest fan.
Well, I don't know about that, but I thought, ooh, because I had done a lot of other, desktop databases before then, Fox Pro and DBase and all those, and this seemed like a huge step forward, which it was. These days I'm not sure it's a good idea in enterprises, but at the time, you're right. You can do so many things.
I still say to customers, if you have an need an embedded database, just create an MSX database.
Yeah,
it will work.
And does your product work against Access databases?
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Database first, model first, no problem. Now, model first, not because it doesn't do model first for MSXs because MSXs can't run DDL SQL. Yeah. There is a way to do it, but it's so complicated that I thought, well, nobody will do that. And I haven't heard any question for that feature, so I think nobody is creating.
Probably not.
Wants to use databases in that environment. So, but actually, that was my first assignment as a free agent.
Nice.
And after that, we created a lot of websites also with databases at the back and even an AS400 database.
It's a challenge.
Which was, it was connected with the SQL Server database and it talked in real time. So it imported data via a file system. It was really ridiculous, actually, but they didn't allow to have a connection with the AS400 directly with the website, so it had to be through another database like SQL Server.
Interesting.
But actually, it turned out to be one of my biggest clients, so it was really great. But after that, it was really tanking. The web crash, of course, in 2001. So
sure.
2001, I think. 2001, I think.
Yeah. Well, it started in 2000, but after 9/11, it got really bad. So that certainly didn't help.
If you were in a web business, it was really a tough sell, and also the advertising agencies came with tools to create a website. So I thought, well, let's create a content management system because then I can make money from my competition.
Right.
So I took the funding of all our savings were eaten up by that content management system. I worked on it for a year and I got 0 customers.
Wow, that's a tough moment.
That was really a learning moment, as we say. Very expensive one, if you say so.
Yeah.
We were almost bankrupt because, we totally miscalculated how that everybody in our business, of course, also wrote their own content management system. So why would they buy a content management system from somebody else?
Right.
So we didn't do any research about, hey, let's create an application for somebody else. So that was a total disaster. I still think the design was okay. It was really a bit with components on websites where you can have you can build a website with components which were stored in the database, and it had a separate designer and all kinds of stuff. So if I look back, I think, well, if I could have a better sales page, it might have taken off a bit, but
it's a learning experience.
It was a learning experience.
Yeah, painful one probably, but still.
Yeah. So I did some freelance work to make ends meet, but that was Visual Basic in on .NET.
Yeah.
So it was really fun, and I wrote an application for generating store procedures and classes that were called store procedures. Because at that time in 2002, I was really convinced that store procedures was the way to go.
Sure, and at that time they were.
Yeah,
I mean that was absolutely true then.
Yeah. dynamic SQL was really evil. Yeah. So I called that tool LLBLGen because how else would you call a tool you think, well, it's nice, but nobody will ever use it. So,
so is there a story behind the name? Because I still don't know what it means.
Well, it's lower level business logic generator.
Ah, okay.
So it's actually an acronym, and it's a very lame acronym, of course, because no one can pronounce it. But at the time, I thought, well, who cares? So I released it for free, open source, on Code Project, I think. No,
SourceForge.
SourceForge, I think it was.
That was a hot one about that time. So
well, I wrote an article on Code Project, I think, with the source code attached as well. So that's basically that's it. And I received a lot of requests about feature additions and if you could model the store procedures. And I thought, well, man, this I have to do something with this. And after I had maybe 50,000 downloads or so, I thought, well, this is something I could commercialize. Or monetize, how they say it today. So I thought, well, after the consultancy job was done, I thought, well, I can write a commercial version of this. So I, again, the poor savings we had scraped together were invested in this commercial project. But I hit a very hard brick wall because you cannot model store procedures in something else than SQL. I mean, who would want a visual design language where you can design expressions where if you can just write it in SQL expression? So after a few months, I sat at my desk and I thought, well, this is not going to work. At that moment, I had a deep flame wars with Thomas Tomicek. Maybe if you remember him, he's on MVP as well.
I do.
And at the time, he had a very fancy ORM called Entity Broker. Mm-hmm. And he was every single day telling me the store procedures sucked and I should do dynamic SQL. And after I sat at my desk and thought, well, what should I do now? I reread his posts and I thought, well, maybe I should give this a shot. So in a few months, I wrote a basic UI and an ORM framework, and I released that. And 5 minutes after I released the first version, I had my first customer, and it's successful ever since.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, I was really shot in the dark because the last month we were running out of money.
I'm sure.
And I didn't know any venture capitalists, so so we just sat here and thought, well, I just have a few weeks left to write some code and documentation, but there's no money. And my wife had registered some domain names back in the day, and she said, well, what if I sell some of them? So we sold some of them off in the next week, and we had just enough money to make to release date. And It was really just everything fell together, and we could release the first version and get the first customers and get the ball rolling.
What I've learned from this story is that you have the most understanding wife I've ever heard of.
Absolutely. Well, you met her.
I have. She does seem pretty understanding. After the CRM, how the CRM product ended, my thought was, oh, he got himself a new wife, because this one understands that, they might run out of money. Like, no, I think that's it.
Yeah, well, she's also a geek, but so she knows how to, what it is to well, not to write software, but really to struggle with beta problems,
sure,
alpha problems. So, well, she did the front end designs for all our websites. So we really were a company where we did both our thing, and with the software, she runs the company now with the support team and all the sales things, and I just write code. But when I have a design problem, for example, and I think, well, how should I solve this? And I explain it to her, and she just answers, and I think, well, this is a solution. So,
of course,
although she doesn't write code, she oftentimes helps me out in the most complicated computer problems. So
that's fun.
Yeah, it's really the most understanding, lovely wife you can ever meet.
That's amazing. Well, it's been great having you on the show. It's been an interesting road you went on, and certainly some differences from where I thought. So for some reason, I thought you'd been doing the code generation stuff for much longer than you had. For some reason, I thought I remembered the product back in like the late 90s, which evidently wasn't true. But
it's still 13 years old, so it's
still a long time.
Not the code you buy today, of course, but it's on the market for 13 years. So
wow.
It's some parts are still in there from the first release, but most of the things have been revisioned and refactored and updated, of course. But code generation was something I also didn't think was really something you could use. But when I wrote the first LLBLGen, it was really an result from the first Visual Studio. I mean, I saw the pictures of the first Visual Studio with the dataset designer, and I thought, well, this is great. I can just design my tables and it will generate stuff for me, and it will be awesome. And then I got the first version of Visual Studio, and I didn't find anything of that in the box. I mean, it was just these are your store procedures, and you can drag them onto the canvas, and I will do some magic with it.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, this is totally the different way around. So I thought, well, I will write a tool for that. And of course, then you have to generate stuff because that's what it does. So it was an obviously solution for the problem at hand, and it turned out great.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for doing the show. And we'll be in touch soon. I'm sure we'll run into each other someplace soon.
Oh, absolutely.
Have an adult beverage. And
okay.
You have a good day.
Okay, you too, man.
Thanks for listening to the Hello World Podcast. Remember, you can subscribe to the Hello World Podcast at hwpod.com.